Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That is, in the name of God, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. We are here today with a special guest that we want to interview about his experience in the pilgrimage to Mecca. And we will introduce him shortly. But the pilgrimage to Mecca, for those who are not familiar, is an obligation on all those who are Muslims, at least once in a lifetime. The Holy Book of the Muslims says, pilgrimage thereto is a duty men owe to Allah, those who can afford the journey. But if any deny faith, Allah stands not in need of any of his creatures. The pilgrimage to Mecca has been a pilgrimage that has been undertaken for thousands of years, since the founding of Mecca. And in recent times, relative to those thousands of years, there have been very famous pilgrimages. One of the most famous has been the pilgrimage of Mansa Musa in 1325 AD, when he made a pilgrimage from West Africa. He was the king of the Mali Empire, and he made pilgrimage. And it's said that he took 60,000 people in that particular journey. He also took with him 5,000 camels that it said were laden with gold. And he spent that gold in the different cities he encountered on his way to Mecca. And this is one of the most famous pilgrimages that is recorded in history. We'd like to cite another famous pilgrimage that changed the course of Islam in America, and that was the pilgrimage of Malcolm X in 1964. His pilgrimage actually set the tone for what he called the spread of Orthodox Islam in America, and that has been chronicled in his book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. And it started a movement that helped to spread the Orthodox practice of Islam in America. A third of the great pilgrimages that we like to cite is one made in 1977, when the leader of the former Nation of Islam, Imam W.D. Muhammad, took the largest group of converts at that time, 1977, to Mecca, and there were over 300. Most of them were converts that had been former members of the Nation of Islam. So we like to think of our guest's history in pilgrimage to Mecca in the light of those great pilgrimages, because he has gone to Mecca an extraordinary 38 times.
37, this would be 38.
He just corrected me. 37, this year would be his 38th pilgrimage. So we like to introduce our guest, Anthony Muhammad. Welcome to our interview. We hope in the course of the interview, we can't get everything, but we get started on the history of your experiences in going to Mecca 38 times. So let's start out with you giving us a little background on how the pilgrimage is required for those who are converted to Islam, who are Muslims. Mm-hmm. How did you give us a history of a brief history of your journey to Islam? So when did you become a Muslim?
Nation of Islam
or any expression of Islam?
Okay, all right. Well, actually, I knew a couple of brothers in the cities that were merchants, and I started working with them, and they were also members of the Nation of Islam.
In what city?
In Oakland.
In Oakland, okay.
And from there, I started, attending the temple with them, and like what I heard, and I thought it was good for black people.
Yeah.
So I started going more and more, and eventually I stood up and became a member. Then I also moved into the type of homes that they had.
Right.
And
FOI house.
Yes. And one of the brothers, I had been knowing him ever since I was young, Brother Marvin. Yes. So when I went there, and then we kept on working and traveling and working. And
let me ask you, what year did you officially join the Nation of Islam?
70 or 71.
70 or 71, okay.
Yeah.
Where were we located at the time? Were we located at?
When I first came, I did come once before when we were in the Havens Court area, 66 Village. After they had moved
in that
from,
store. Yeah, we
after
moved
they moved from 85th.
Yes.
And
Okay, let's go back. So originally the first temple that was opened by Billy X. Stevens and his brother Joseph X. Stevens, who became Yusuf Bey,
right.
was at next to Calsamount.
Right.
And then we moved from there about 70-ish, okay? And we moved, there was an MB store or a store or something like that right next to the Ville. They called it the Ville.
Okay.
And we were only there for about 6 or 7 months.
Okay.
And then from there we moved where?
8th and Pine.
We moved to 8th and Pine,
8th and
okay.
Pine, right, okay.
So that was probably 71-ish, I guess.
Right.
Okay. So still Nation of Islam in
Yes.
a while, okay.
Well, there was a little turmoil in between Temple 26 and Temple 26B.
Exactly.
And one of the brothers felt uncomfortable because I think his life may have been threatened. And Mr. Louis Farrakhan came out here to give a lecture at Foothill College and Berkeley. But he also came...
Foothill College in Berkeley.
No, Foothill College and Berkeley,
okay.
right. And also he spoke twice at the temple in San Francisco.
Okay.
So as a member of Temple 26B, we went over to San Francisco and liked what we saw there and decided to become a member over there.
Oh, so you moved from Oakland?
Oakland,
to
San Francisco.
Okay.
There was still more turmoil between the two ministers.
Sure.
And one of them got what they call busted or sat down,
Right.
the minister in San Francisco.
Right, minister.
And the new minister came out from Massachusetts, Mr. John B. John Muhammad.
Okay.
And he invited someone that he knew from Connecticut, Abdul Karim, who was the minister in Los Angeles.
Yes.
So we had already visited when we were on a business trip, the temple in LA, so I already knew his teaching style.
Sure, yeah.
Before John Muhammad, so I moved there. I moved to Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I stayed there.
What year roughly is this?
I think it was 72.
Okay.
And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad died.
That was
75.
75.
And
so you
Imam-
stayed there for those 3 years?
Even longer, even longer. So Imam Muhammad came in, and right away he started making a lot of changes. One of the first changes he made that same year was the changing of what we used to call Ramadan, which was always stationary in the month of December,
Yes.
to the correct month, the 9th month of the fasting.
Yes.
And then shortly after that, he, as you mentioned, took 300 people to Mecca for the pilgrimage.
That was 1977.
77, yes.
Because we didn't, to clarify, we didn't make pilgrimage to Mecca necessarily before the Honorable Elijah Muhammad died. We
Right.
used to go to Chicago
For the Savior's Day, yes.
for what we call Savior's Day
Right.
on the 26th of February.
Right.
And that would be our yearly gathering. And so the transition to what Malcolm called Orthodox Islam
Yes.
took place on the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And then, so how did pilgrimage become a focus for your personal practice?
Well,
Although we know that every Muslim has to make it once in a
Yes.
lifetime, as we begin to learn in Orthodox Islam. And we're using the term Orthodox. It's not the best
Sunni
term,
Orthodox.
but it is a term that people may understand from having read the
Right.
autobiography and what have you.
I went on the first time in 1981.
Okay.
And when I got there, I had really never seen anything as beautiful as the pilgrimage.
Okay.
Okay.
So you were saying that your first pilgrimage to Mecca happened in 1981.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Why didn't you go to pilgrimage in 1977? Was there a reason, or it just happened that way? Or
Finances.
Okay, yes.
Finances.
Yes, because not compared to today's prices, but back then it still was expensive.
Well, the first time I went over there, It was only $1,000.
In 1981.
Yes.
Wow. Well,
And I just made my payment for this Hajj, the last payment yesterday, and it was $8,100.
wow. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Inflation.
Yes.
So your first Hajj in 1981.
Yes.
Okay. And what was it about that Hajj that made you want to go back?
Well, it was easy because, you know, we were guests of a group called the Muslim World League, Rabitat.
Yes.
And the only thing we had to pay for was our expensive. The lodging was free.
Okay.
The transportation was free. And we had 2 excellent guides,
Okay.
Dr. Lonnie Shabazz and
From the
DC.
American Muslim community.
Yes.
Yes. American, African American Muslim
Right.
convert community that had been former members of the Nation of Islam.
And another minister was a minister in New Orleans, Minister George Forex, Halim, I think it's Halim, from Washington, D.C. So they took me on the first pilgrimage, and they
Okay.
were pretty together. So.
Okay, good,
Yes.
good. Okay, so you make your first pilgrimage,
Right.
which is only required once in your lifetime by Muslims. You only have to go by requirement once, if you are able, and that's only if you're able.
Right.
And if you're able, it's usually defined as you have to have the money, because of course you have to pay. You have to have the health, because it's a relatively rigorous journey. Otherwise, there's a lot of walking, and then to complete the rituals, and you have to, and the way has to be safe. You know,
Yes.
no war going on where there's, you know, difficulty getting there, things of that nature. But if you don't have those, and you have to be an adult Muslim, children don't have to go. You have to reach the age of, and now it becomes an obligation for us. But the obligation is only once. So now, what inspired you to go a second time?
The Hajj pilgrimage is bigger than any of us can imagine.
Yes.
And it actually was the beauty of it.
Yeah, yeah.
It was the beauty of the Hajj to see what was going on, and I actually got passionate about it and really kind of fell in love with it.
Okay.
And before I left there, I decided I'm going to come back next year.
Okay.
So I don't really tell people this, but once I got back, I lived every second of the day to go back, you know.
Yes.
And I still remember the day I woke up, it was time to go back. So
Okay.
yeah.
Good, good, good.
And that's been like that every year.
Now, another extraordinary thing that we haven't mentioned, not only have you gone to Hajj, but you began to take people with you.
Yes.
And this makes it that, you know, it was already extraordinary to go so many times, but to take people almost am I wrong in saying every time, or almost every time you've taken people along with you?
For a few years, I didn't take anybody.
Okay.
John Abdul Haq, who was the national secretary, but I knew him as secretary of Temple 27. He was in charge, you know, making the arrangements and everything. So he would meet us at the airport, even though he wasn't going that year. And every year he would see me and tell me that I should sponsor somebody. So the next year I sponsored one person.
Okay. You paid for their way to go
Yes,
to Hajj.
okay.
Okay.
Now, that was like 84, 85. And I didn't sponsor anybody, you know, the next couple of years. But what happened was, in 87, I was Rabitat again, Muslim World League.
What year?
87.
1987. Okay.
And my passport didn't have enough years on it to get a visa. So the Saudi embassy in New York denied me a visa. So I wasn't supposed to go. They just said go next year. And some people from Rabitat went down there and talked with them, and they said just go next year. So I wasn't supposed to go. And I was on a business trip, went down to Washington, D.C. And I said, well, if I'm not going to Mecca, let me go to Egypt or one of the Arab countries.
Okay.
So I go into the travel agency and I ask the guy about a ticket to Egypt.
Yes.
And he asked me would I be going on to the Hajj. So I told him about the story that I had planned to go to Hajj, but I couldn't get a visa.
Sure.
And he was a Caucasian male that had lived in Arabia, Riyadh or something like that.
Sure.
And he was good friends of the leader at the embassy in Washington, D.C. So he called the guy up and told him that he had a person, that wanted to go to Hajj, and he kind of told him about my problem.
Sure.
And sent me over there, and he told me what to tell him, the reason I did, because I had all the paperwork and everything. And so the guy, he wasn't going to do it at first, but he had an Arab woman there that went back and talked to him. They decided to do it.
Okay.
So I went in on the 87th on the last plane on standby. And because I was so grateful for being able to go that year,
Yes.
I said, by that time I had started saving my money and everything,
Sure. Yeah.
and I had money in the bank. So I said, you know what, next year I'm going to bring 10 people with me,
Allah.
So at the 88 I brought 10 people, 89 I brought 10 people, 90 it was up to 30.
Subhanallah.
So, and then 91 after the Gulf War, I went back again, solo again, didn't take anybody. And then 92, 3, 4, 5, 6, I started taking like 10 again. So
Wow.
I was just a little over 100 people that
Your total number that you've taken over the 38 years or during that period of time, you're saying?
No, just
That's,
totally, just over 100.
Okay, just over 100 people.
So at the same time, because I did so many, I started performing the Hajj for others.
Okay.
Like this last particular Hajj I did was for Brother Khaled.
The Hajj is one of the requirements of Islam that could be done for someone who's unable to complete them.
Yes.
Yeah,
If you
on their own.
have done your own.
If you after you've done your own,
Yes.
then you can do it for someone else in the name of someone else, and that you get, of course, a credit with Allah, a blessing, as we say, for the charity of doing that, and they get the blessing of having fulfilled their obligation to make Hajj.
Right, but I didn't know if I got the blessing or not. It
Absolutely.
didn't make any difference. But there's a guy in Philadelphia that takes a group, Ghani.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, we'll be traveling with him this year. He said that you do get blessed for doing it.
Absolutely.
But I've done it for others, and I've also done it for myself in between.
Sure.
And it seems like when I do it for myself, it seems a little bit better, at least,
What do you mean by a little bit? It feels better to you, or?
Well, it feels better to me
Yeah.
because I didn't know if you get any credit at all for doing it. It didn't matter. But once he told me that I do get something for doing it,
Yes.
then lately I just been doing it for others altogether.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tell us about one, or what you have already started. The Hajj that sticks with you the most that you made, if there is one.
Well, I tell you something.
That can be separated from the others.
Well, okay. Well, let me try the third Hajj.
Okay.
Because on the third Hajj, first two Hajjs I went with Muslim World League.
Yes.
Rabita.
Yes.
But now on the third Hajj, which they had a building in Mina, so it's hard to get lost.
Right. Yes.
On the third Hajj, Imam Muhammad thought we should try to do it on our own. So I made the reservations, I made the plans. I went over and I did well in Mecca.
Yes.
When we went out to the tents in Mina, I walked on the 8th. I walked away without getting a sign where my tent was
Yes.
around noon. And I ended up getting lost. And so I was lost on the 8th and 9th.
Okay.
And I ended up having to walk all day, but I knew I had to go to Arafat on the 9th. So I just took off walking toward Arafat, and I walked most of the way, stayed in a mosque that was under construction.
Yes.
Met some good pilgrims from Indonesia.
Yes.
That was a pretty good one.
Right.
And so I went on the Arafat, and I was able to stay in some tents with some of the good Muslims. And on the 10th, I went back to where I was staying at, and they took me to join the group,
How many days does it take to perform the rites of Hajj?
Well, basically, we start on the 8th.
The 8th of the
Dhul Hijjah.
of Dhul Hijjah, which is the last month in the Islamic calendar.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and then we leave there and we go to Mina.
Yes.
All right, then the next day we go to Arafat,
This is on the 9th.
the 9th.
And it's said in the traditions of Islam that Arafat
Is
the
the
Hajj al-Arafat, that the Hajj is Arafat.
Yes.
Arafat is the most important day of Hajj based on that expression. And then So the 8th and 9th, and then
10th,
the 10th,
11th, and then the 12th.
the 10th, 11th, and 12th.
Right.
So that's 5 days
Okay.
that you have to, each day you have to perform certain rites,
Yes.
certain rituals
Yes.
at those places that you have to be there, and you have to perform those rites or those rituals at those places in order to say, a Hajj is not just going to Mecca, what I'm saying.
Right.
You
Yeah.
have a place to be and things to perform, and if you perform those, if you're at those places and perform those rites, it is said that you made Hajj.
There's some things that you have to, you can make expiation for, a few
Yeah.
things like,
Yeah.
sacrifice another lamb or whatever.
Yes.
But on the 10th of the Hajj, you stone one of the Jama Rights. It's the stoning of the devil.
Okay, so the Jama Rights are what?
It's a pillar that represents stoning the shaitan, that commemorating Abraham being tempted by Satan to disobey the order and sacrificing his son.
Okay,
And he threw stones at Satan,
okay.
so.
So we symbolically reenact
Yes.
Abraham's battle with the Satan
And there's three of them.
by throwing at these stone pillars.
Right.
They used to be stone pillars now, because I've seen recent pictures. I haven't been,
Yeah.
but now they're a little
Smoothed out, yeah.
they're configured a little different now.
Yes,
Yeah.
because of the different crowding situation under there and the trampling and
Yeah.
everything. Now you don't hear that as much.
Okay.
When I first started going over there, you get back to Mecca and you could hear 72 people killed at the Jama Right. Now you don't hear that anymore.
Sure. Yes.
So.
Yes. They made adjustments in order
Yes.
to make the Hajj safer.
Right.
Another thing I guess we have to mention: how many people go to Hajj every year?
Well, right now it's I would say between 2 and 3 million.
2 and 3 million.
Yes.
And I think that they restricted the number some years ago because, the facilities
Yes.
had outgrown,
Right.
the crowds have outgrown the capacity for some
Yes.
facilities to make it safe for people.
Okay.
And so they began to say only certain countries you can send so many people.
Okay. But since then, every year I go back, it's different.
Yes.
The Saudis are building,
Yes.
they're beautifying places. And last year, or the year before last, when I went into the Haram,
The Haram, that's the sacred mosque, the
Yes.
precinct where the sacred mosque
Right.
of Mecca is, and where the Kaaba, the black stone, the Kaaba, the direction that we face in prayer
and
is.
Abraham Station.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And as well as Zamzam.
Zamzam, okay.
Okay. 2 years ago when I went in there, there's so much building that I actually got lost in there.
Right.
I actually got lost inside.
Exactly.
So they had they completed most of the accommodation and widened it, so now they allow more people to come back.
Okay. Yes, right. So yeah, they have to constantly keep up with the demand because
Yes.
Islam continues to grow, and those people continue to have the obligation of going to Hajj. So therefore, it's pressure all the time for the numbers to increase.
That's what happened 2 years ago. I would say, maybe you heard of it here in the States, that the crane fell. Did you guys hear
Yes,
about
the crane.
that?
Yeah, the crane.
Well,
did fall, yeah.
because they were doing building there, but nothing stopped the pilgrimage.
Right, yes, right, yeah.
Some of the people, American people, thought, well, maybe it would be stopped because of that, but everything goes on.
Well, historically, I think from the best histories about pilgrimage, that Mecca actually was founded by the African lady, Hajj, who was the wife of Prophet Abraham, Radiallahu anhuma, may Allah be pleased with them both. And, but it was the African lady and her son, Ismail, who became also a prophetic figure, who were the first permanent residents of Mecca. And the dates of this go back, the scholars debate when it happened. And then the Prophet Abraham was ordered to build that house, which is called the Kaaba, along with his son. He helped him to construct the house. And then people were ordered to make pilgrimage to this house since the time of Mecca. And even though the indigenous people over the thousands of years lost the purity of the religion over a period of time, people never stopped making pilgrimage to Mecca. So you say that the pilgrimage wasn't interrupted by the cranes. It hasn't been interrupted by anything even when the purity of the religion was challenged by people bringing in
Idols.
right idols and things like that into the Kaaba. But people still made the pilgrimage there. So there were remnants of the original religion that Abraham had brought, even during that time when there were other kinds of beliefs that had had been set up in Mecca. But it was Muhammad of 1,400 years ago, or roughly 1,500 years ago, who rededicated the house, and he purified the pilgrimage to its original, back to its original purpose.
Yes.
And so this is the Hajj that all Muslims are obligated to do once in a lifetime. The numbers of Muslims have been growing. I think the average now, you hear quoted, is $1.5 billion.
Right.
1.5 billion Muslims, and it's projected by 2020 or 2050 to be 2 billion or something like that. So I'm sure they're going to have to continue to build.
Yes.
Now I guess this might be the same question. What is your most, you gave us the most memorable, what is your most challenging Hajj?
In 93, 4, a person that we were on Hajj with him, Omar Rashidin.
Yeah, he was on Hajj the year I went. But he came with the group from Los Angeles.
Yeah, I was with him.
Yeah.
And him and the guy from Los Angeles, I don't know his name, they call him JJ. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was an old guy.
Yes.
That'd be around the mosque. But we were all together in Mina. And the crowds were so thick in there. And it looked like that was going to be the end for us. Because the crowds were so thick and we were being pushed into cars and things like that. But eventually with so many people that it broke down the fence and a lot of people were able to spill in over there. And that was kind of the most challenging.
The most challenging,
probably most fearful, we would say.
Sure, yeah. You mentioned your experience on Hajj, and most people who go to Hajj have not exactly the same experience of being disoriented, or they see people on Hajj from other countries, particularly Africans, because we're mostly African extraction. And sometimes they see us and they look at our look and they say, "Oh, you must be from our tribe," or "You must be from our country because you have the characteristics in your face of our country." Not so much the tribal marks, because some of them have tribal marks.
Yes.
But sometimes they say, "Oh, you're not from," and so they begin to speak to us in their language, because many times they're speaking their indigenous language and they don't necessarily speak English. And so this is one of the amazing things that most people go to Hajj, they experience something like that.
Yes, like I was on the Hajj once, and one African guy, he asked me where I was from, and I told him I was American. But he said, no, where you in Africa are you really from? And I told him I was American.
Right.
So he went and got a lot of group of his people, and he came back, and he wanted me to tell them the same thing that
you told him.
I told him. You are an African American, because from what all he could see is I was just another African.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know what you're saying.
So he wasn't necessarily saying you were from his tribe, but that you were definitely from Africa, not America.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yes.
They couldn't believe that I was an American.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the beautiful things that Malcolm mentions in his pilgrimage was this universality that you encounter on the Hajj that you don't encounter in your local countries. Otherwise, you see people from all over the world, and you see so many different looks, so many different complexions, so many different colors of the eyes, colors of the hair, almost that some new colors that this struck me when I was on Hajj, that was just like, and I felt a little of what I guess Malcolm felt when he went, especially when he went, because he went by himself. He didn't go with a group.
Yes.
He didn't go with a group, and you by it. So and it was his first time, but it might not have been his first time, because I heard that perhaps Malcolm made Umrah before that. There's a little historical investigation we have to do about that. He might have made Umrah before that, but I think he had traveled internationally. Had you traveled internationally before you made pilgrimage?
No.
That was the first time you were out
Well,
there?
I had been to,
In
a few
81.
places, like Mexico and Jamaica.
Yeah, well, that's international,
Yeah.
but some
Yes.
people, so
Yes.
some people, the first time they go out of the country is the pilgrimage. So I think it helps a little having gone somewhere else, because you get a little taste, you're sampling another culture, you're in that environment, and you have to kind of imbibe.
Well, I knew a couple of people that were really educated,
Yes,
and I talked to them about my first pilgrimage, going over there just before I went, and they both said the same thing, that I would find the exchange, the cultural exchange, language exchange,
yes,
I would find it good for me.
yes. Yeah, and this is one of the purposes of Hajj. It is said not necessarily well, it's a religious value too, to know how to meet and greet and respect, people from different experiences, from different ethnicity. And of course, this is what Malcolm emphasized, that was in such contrast to how we understood Islam under the older teachings from the Nation of Islam. We know there were some reasons for those teachings, but Malcolm said for the first time he drank out of the same cup and ate out of the same plate of a man who in America he would consider white.
Right.
But he said the extraordinary thing was that person didn't have the racism, and he didn't feel racism coming from him in his presence. And so this is what was highlighted in his pilgrimage. And I think to some degree, everybody kind of has an experience a little like that, even though not necessarily with a white person. Could be a person from for instance, in Mecca, I remember when we were in Arafat especially, well, they just had one big plate. It was like, a huge plate. And the food was on that plate. And everybody ate out of that same plate.
Yes.
Everybody didn't have a separate plate.
Right.
Everybody ate out of that same plate. And of course, the traditional way of eating in the Islamic lands, according to the religion, some people say it's sunnah, which it is, the Prophet ate this way, was to eat with your hands, and you eat out of the plate. So this is something that I think Malcolm captured or impacted Malcolm, particularly when it came to people who he considered white. But the key value was that person didn't look at him as lesser, and because of that, he didn't look at that person as an enemy. And this helps to bring about this focus on what's called Orthodox Islam, because this wasn't necessarily a value that we at least emphasized during the Nation of Islam. It was a lesser value. In the Nation of Islam, of course, we emphasized our coming together as an ethnic group, because our challenge in America has been because of our ethnicity, our color, from slavery, et cetera, all the way to the time of the 60s. So this is the beginning of a conversation we hope to have with you. We know you have a lot more to share with us, and perhaps in our next segment we will be able to explore some of the other nuggets that you can relate to us concerning your Hajj. So 37 times. So another question: has it been 37 consecutive times?
Yes.
There's no time that you didn't make Hajj since 1981.
Only the time when I wasn't supposed to go and end up going anyway. Because
but I'm saying, but you went.
Yes.
You didn't. So
yes.
this is
every
yes.
year. This basically, if I had went the year that you went, then I'd been this 15th century Islamic century. So
okay, right. The year we went. Was the beginning in the Islamic calendar.
The 15th century.
Right. It was the beginning of 15th century.
So I went the next year.
Yes, right.
And so this is 1439.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
that's a good way of keeping track.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, that was one of my motivating factors, that I was already trying to make Hajj. I wanted to go when Imam Muhammad went in 1977.
Right.
I wasn't able to. And I had made other journeys outside the United States. And I began to think about what we said recently. I had been to Morocco, I had been to England and those places. I began to say, suppose if I die, having gone to Morocco and in England, and I had been to Egypt already,
Right.
and I haven't gone to pilgrimage. How would I answer this before Allah?
Alhamdulillah.
So I said, and then the 1400 year was coming, and there's a, and
yeah.
the 1500 year,
Yes, right.
year 1400, but 15th century
Right.
was coming, and it said in one of the prophetic traditions that at the beginning of every century, that Allah would send a mujaddid,
Right. Yes.
would send a mujaddid, one who would come to renew the religion
Right.
for the Muslims, and so all these factors were moving on me to try to make that pilgrimage that particular year, and we were fortunate enough to make it. So in asking you what was your motivating factors, they were a little bit different, but still, you know, they were they're very powerful. And in fact, they kept that power in you and on you to do it 37 consecutive.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I have, I've always made the Eid al-Adha over there, you know.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah. The Eid al-Adha is the end of the celebration
Feast of, yeah.
at the end of the time of
Sacrifice.
pilgrimage.
Yes.
So you've always been over in Mecca during that time. So thank you, Anthony Muhammad.